All right, welcome into another episode of the Idea Collision. I'm Andrew Green. I'm your host for the podcast. I am also a minister in the Waukesha Church of Christ. I am a facilitator for a group called Healing Hearts. I've talked about both of those. And the reason why it's important to mention those is that the things that we talk about in this podcast are things that relate to at least some of my duties and roles in both of those instances. Healing Hearts more dedicated to the emotional, physical consequences and dealing with those. It's not really a faith-based organization, though I think most of us are probably religious in some sense. But as a minister, more directly spiritual, the consequences of things that are our actions. And our actions and decisions are based on the ideas that we have. And as we combine those ideas and have priorities, those affect us. So we're going to be wrapping up kind of the discussion we've talked about in terms of paradoxes, these kind of ideas that are opposite. But today we're not going to be talking about any specific generation. Some of the ones we've focused have been particular to younger people and kind of where they're at culturally, but these are just linked to us as people, what we're talking about today as we transition to a different topic on kind of culture in general. And so we're going to go back to an idea we touched on, I think, a lot earlier. Typically, what we're going to be talking about today, these are separate, right? These podcasts are kind of separate, but they're linked. In other words, you can watch these, and I've mentioned this before, that you can watch these individually and just get the lesson out of it. You don't have to watch something else, but they do help to go back to some of the earlier ones. If you haven't, I encourage you to do that. Because they are linked. They do kind of build on other things. And what we need to do, like if there's an idea we need, then I'll repeat it. But we're talking about a paradox that generally people have. And so we've talked about pragmatism before, and we're going to talk about pragmatism and idealism a little bit today. When people are younger, they are more idealistic, right? And this kind of goes based on what we talked about. It's connected to what we talked about last week, talking about experience. People don't have experience to know what works and what doesn't work yet, right? What fails and they haven't failed enough yet, so they haven't had those experiences. And so as they develop those experiences, the idealism fades, because I had this ideal that this would work, and it didn't work. So now I know that, right? That's kind of works into what we call pragmatism. And if you think you know which one I'm going to be talking about, which one I like or whatever, then stay tuned. The podcast specifically we were talking about various types of logic, and we talked about, one of the things we talked about was best practices. This is when people look at the things that work for their business or for whatever it is, and they say these are best practices. You'll hear that phrase, and so best practices is a type of pragmatism. This works. Let's continue doing this. This didn't work this year. Let's scrap this business model or what have you. So that's kind of pragmatism. Idealism appeals to a certain group of people, and you're likely lean one way. You either lean towards idealism. Typically it's by age, but it is not always by age. You either lean towards pragmatism or idealism. You either idealism appeals to people because it feels like you're holding a standard, and that's good. We want to hold a standard. And so I developed these ideals. This is the way things should be, right? This is a paradox, not in people all the time, but in life. And here's a contradiction, that a theory doesn't always work, and sometimes we say it's a good theory. Now, most of the times when we work through a theory, and it's wrong, we conclude that the theory is wrong. That's kind of like science. That's, I have this theorem about this experiment or this historical, whatever it is, and I put it into practice and it didn't work. So I said, well, likely my theory was incorrect, and that's a good thing to do. That's how inventions are made. I want to invent this thing, and then so I go through this process, and it didn't work. Who knew? So now I know. That's pragmatism in a certain sense. So we conclude that the theory is wrong, especially if it's tried a number of times, right? Beating your head against the wall and it's not working. We go, all right, how many times, for example, this is always referred to because it seems like an obvious cultural example. How many times do we have to try communism or socialism before we realize that it doesn't work? It always ends up in the same thing of some type of violence or some type of inequality or poverty, right, of the people who try it. It always ends up there. So when do we scrap the idea? Well, apparently not yet, but that's different. Topic for a different day. But do we conclude that it's the wrong idea? Well, we probably should, but it's not. It doesn't always work like that. Take biblically, for example. Here's a sentence in the Bible, statement. A gentle answer, this is an idea. A gentle answer turns away wrath. Well, it doesn't always. All right. So do we conclude that it was the wrong idea? Right? Do we conclude that the Bible's wrong? See, pragmatism would say, well, that didn't work, so that was not a best practice. I gave a gentle answer and the guy beat me up. Okay, well, so the Bible's wrong. And there are ways that we can look at, how and why to reconcile some of these things. Well, pragmatism really, there are some problems with pragmatism. Now, pragmatism is when people evaluate typically exclusively on the outcome. Right? That's pragmatism. We're just completely outcome. They're not considered with they don't consider the ideal. That's not their interest. What is the idea behind something? So this didn't work. The idea is wrong. Now, in many examples, this does work. I pointed out one of them, right? But it doesn't always work. So a degree of pragmatism is intelligent. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and, expecting a different result, right? That's kind of the idea of pragmatism. So there is a degree of pragmatism that is intelligent, I think. And but we want to figure out then how to reconcile these two opposites. This idealism that hasn't learned what works or not, and then this other idea that only looks at the result. And that is kind of where we start at looking at pragmatism. We shouldn't give up on having ideals. Pragmatism would say we should not have ideals. We should just have results. Pragmatism only weighs the end. Well, the ends justifies the means is like the perfect summary of pragmatism. And unfortunately, there's so many problems with pragmatism. One is that it leads to instability because, you could do, as we pointed out, a gentle answer doesn't always turn away wrath. So I might conclude in that moment, well, we should scrap it. Well, but what if it did? Right? There are times where it does. So then I'm back on it. Like pragmatism is very unstable. It's very and the reason is it's very short-term focused. Pragmatism tends to look at they call it recency bias. It's whatever has just happened. That did not work. Let's not do that again. That hurt. So obviously unchecked ideals are going to cause us problems. But so is pragmatism. Pragmatism is such a focus on the immediate benefit. And in the long term, that character and integrity we would develop, that's undermined. It's not interested. Pragmatism is not interested in that. So pragmatism would say, well, telling a lie was beneficial in this area, therefore telling a lie is okay, right? And that's okay. It worked. It did something. Pragmatism also typically focuses on a physical, tangible type of result, right? So it was financially beneficial, or it gave me some type of recognition. It gave me acceptance to this group. There was some material thing that I could focus on and quantify. The long term, well, this made me a better person, or like, we don't tend to analyze things on that because it's too abstract and it's long term. Character development takes a long time. So pragmatism, not interested in that. The most dangerous element of pragmatism is this, that it's reactionary, right? And it analyzes, it has a type of analysis, right? But in a sense that it deceptively eliminates the mind. It just reacts to what didn't feel like it didn't work right. And so it feels like I'm analyzing the situation. Oh, we did this. It didn't work, and it has that feeling of analysis, but it's not. It's just like it's just a reaction to a negative outcome. It's not really looking at anything. It's just observing and reaching an immediate conclusion that seems to be most the straight point, or the straight line between 2 points kind of an analysis. It doesn't weigh why a thing, for example, worked. Pragmatism doesn't consider why this gentle answer turned away wrath in this case, but not in the other case. And I use that illustration, but it's sticking with it kind of, because this is one of the things that people discard. Why did the lie work? Why did the lie not work? Right? It doesn't look at that. And so pragmatism is so dangerous in many ways. It's not that we should not try to analyze what works or doesn't work, but pragmatism by itself, it is destructive. It's dangerous. So it often just looks at one. The particulars. Another thing is it often just looks at the one outcome that I like or that most appeals to me and focuses on that. We don't look at the other outcomes. It just is very simplistic in its variables that it looks at. It doesn't say, okay, so this benefited me, but it hurt everybody around me. Well, it benefited me. That's all I care about. So there's so many problems with pragmatism. As you say, well, see, obviously idealism is the best one. Well, idealism is also a problem. It's somewhat of a misnomer. Idealism is not ideaism. In other words, it's not always based on ideas. In fact, a lot of times it is not based on ideas. It is often based on emotion, right? Idealism says it would be nice if, right? It would be a nice idea if everybody had the same amount. Let's go back to the communism. If everybody was equal and had the same amount of money, that would be nice. That would be fair. See, so the fairness, in this sense, it appeals to that emotion. Fairness that's one of the things we like. It's not really an idea. It's an emotion. The best way of communicating idealism is on a bumper sticker, because it's not really an idea. You don't have to explain it. It's just a feeling. It just takes a couple of words, and we should all be equal, or we should, whatever the idea is, the simplistic idea, right? That's idealism. It's based on emotion, and you'll notice that. So in the end, really, it doesn't weigh out ideas any more than pragmatism. It feels like it does, and this is why I said, hold on if you think I'm leaning one way or the other. Now, we all lean one way, and we will. I know we said that it's not an age or it's not a generation thing, right? It's not specific to millennials. It's not specific to Gen Z. It's specific to an age. It typically is any age. Go back to the hippies, go back to whatever age. It is the young people that tend to be idealistic of any generation. So it is an age thing. And pragmatism tends to be an older person thing. And they both have a degree of accuracy. They both have a degree of positivity. There are good things in both, right? But just left to themselves, they're not that good. All right? Jesus said this. He said, "Those who worship me must worship in spirit and in truth." Well, if you think about that, that kind of has a little bit of both. The spirit, the emotion. Jesus is like, okay, there's a certain degree of idealism that's good, but unchecked against reality, that's harmful. But if we just focus on facts of things, that's not healthy as well. Now, I want to illustrate how tricky this is to get around, to look at exactly how sneaky pragmatism specifically is. I used to quote a famous mathematician. Right? Now, think about this. Mathematician is intelligence, right? A mathematician came up with this. It must be a good idea. His name was Blaise Pascal. He was a religious person, and we talk about Pascal's triangle, I think it is, and I don't even know what that is. It's something in math. Anyway, so, but it's a way of calculating numbers of some sort. Anyway, not the point. He came up with an idea, and it was called Pascal's wager. It was a religious gambit, kind of. He said, well, there are 4 outcomes mathematically. There's a choice. I have 2, and each of these has 2 possibilities. So there's 4 total outcomes. He said, I can believe in God or not believe in God, right? So if I believe in God, I can be right or wrong. If I don't believe in God, I can be right or wrong, right? Simple probability. So he said, let's look at these. If I don't believe in God and, I'm right, what do I get? So in other words, follow these out pragmatically. Well, let's see. If I believe in God and I'm right, like that's the best possible solution, right? If I believe in God as He is and I'm right, I mean, I get all the rewards, everything that goes with us. That's the greatest possibility. Now, if I don't believe in God and I'm wrong, what happens? Well, I've lived a good life. I die, but nothing happens after that. There's no eternity or whatever because there's no God. But I've lived a good life. I've probably avoided, a lot of the harms that come with living the life of, that goes against the Bible, the divorces, the emotional distress, all the alcoholism, and the various things that tend to go with people who live, lives that are not religious. On the other hand, I could be a person that doesn't believe in God, and I could be right. Well, I'm probably gonna live all those things and do most of those things or a good portion of them, and I'm gonna suffer a number of consequences of varying degrees, and then I'm gonna die, and I'm gonna be right. There's no God. On the other hand, I could believe that there's no God, right? And I could be wrong. So not only am I going to suffer here, but at the end of it all, I could possibly suffer, an eternal punishment. So Blaise Pascal's idea was this. He said, mathematically, it doesn't make sense. To not believe in God, pragmatically, doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Right? Why would I believe in this? Because the best I can do is to live kind of an awful life and nothing happens here. The worst I can do if I believe in God is to live a decent life, have fewer consequences, and then nothing happens after here. That like the worst I can do as a Christian is better than the best I can do as a non-Christian. And that's pragmatism. And that always sounded intelligent to me. And there's a verse that I had read so many times, and I never put it up against this, and Paul disagrees with pragmatism. Oh, what? Paul thinks you should live in immoral? No, that's not what I said. But there's a statement in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. He's talking about the resurrection. And he said, listen, if the resurrection didn't happen, we are the most pitiable people of everybody on the earth. So Paul did not think that it was better to believe in the resurrection if it didn't happen. All this God stuff, and if it didn't happen, if it's not real, we're actually the worst off. Now, according to Blaise Pascal, that is not accurate. But Paul disagrees. Now, Paul has a slightly higher standing in my book than Blaise Pascal. So I said, I've got to rethink how I'm looking at this. What's wrong with how I'm looking at this? Because I'm now disagreeing with Paul, because I'm on Blaise Pascal's side. The problem is that I was thinking pragmatically. Really, actually, he says, no. Here you are, you're living a lie. And in the end, that's worse. It's better to live a truth and have some consequences. Even the short, it's like you getting up and you're going to church. You don't have to. You're denying yourself physical enjoyment. Listen, if you're going to die here, at least have physical enjoyment. Well, what about the character? Who cares about the character? If there's no eternity, who cares about character? It's like, well, but now you're going to have the stuff like divorce. Okay, so that's a negative circumstances. But if there's no God, if there's no religion, if there's no morality, who cares about if I got a divorce? Like, it doesn't. All of these things that I place I've evaluated as the negative circumstances really aren't negative circumstances in the long term if there is no God. If all of this stuff is false. So pragmatism sets up a standard, but it's based on nothing. So all of these conclusions, idealism says, listen, go out and have some fun. It's not real. So in the end, neither of them really are the best. Some combination or a third type of analysis is necessary, which is more accurate. There's a third option. It's not just either or. It requires a genuine analysis, and this is where you can begin in your life. Begin where you are at, and start analyzing what it is, the priorities that you have, the ideas you have. Okay, and this goes deeper into that idealism. Why didn't the idealism work? Why didn't those ideals work? What was it? You go back to that we talked about the gentle answer turning away wrath. That silly illustration, which is not really silly. It's a biblical statement, but I mean, just for the purpose of this, oversimplifying it to one type of a situation. But, there are reasons why that might not have worked, right? In the end, people make choices, or there's so many different variables within why it could work in here and why it might just be that we look at it and it was never intended to be an overarching universal statement. Right? Pragmatism says, well, that didn't work. That's a bad idea. Well, maybe it was never meant to be a universal, and you interpret it as such. This is why I say it needs a deeper, genuine analysis of whatever my priorities, whatever my life structures and my decisions are. I need to begin analyzing them now. But wherever you're at, and whatever side you lean toward, do you love the ideals or do you like the pragmatism? I don't know. That each of us is different. We probably, based on age and based on character and experience, we will lean one way or the other. And I need to know, did this work or did this appear to work? And maybe it doesn't really work. How did this work? It felt good to me. It did something positive for me, but did it do that for other people? How are other people now based on that? These are deeper ideals that require, an analysis that is not really pragmatic. Or my ideals. Am I basing what I value based on just simply on my emotions? This feels like it should be the direction that I take, but maybe what feels right is not right. And if my feelings of what should be don't seem to be coming up with reality, that pragmatism, maybe this is where that deeper analysis. Why? What is it about the ideal that is wrong? Maybe I have principles that I have accepted as truth that aren't really true. And so this is this paradox, this idealism, pragmatism, and people fall on one side of the reality between the both of these is that they are both misguided. That God called us to have a more spiritual viewpoint, a long-term viewpoint, to weigh out the substance of things. And really, idealism and pragmatism both they don't concern themselves with substance of a priority or a principle. So in both cases, there is something better, and I hope you go out and find it, or at least start to find it this week. If you want to, if you do like this, please subscribe, share this with somebody, and look at our links in the description. So have a good week.